If you want to run your first 100-mile ultramarathon, the most impactful and critical decision you'll make is choosing the right race. So today I'm going to share with you my top pick for your first 100-mile ultramarathon. And for good measure, I'm going to give some counterexample that might become long-term goal that you can revisit once you've gained a little bit more experience. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. I'm a normal guy with a normal life and a normal job, but I love running and I want to share this passion with you. I have quite a few guides to help you train to longer distance event, and my 100-mile guide is coming up probably later this year. But first, I want to discuss a little bit about a decision that is extremely important, choosing the right race for you. Myself, when I picked my first 100-mile, I had no clue what I was doing. Now I have a little bit more experience, almost 60 finishes. I understand a little bit better which races are kind of forgiving a little bit and which races are really tailored towards experienced runner. But not that there's any 100-mile that are for beginner runner, right? We're talking about advanced running. There's no 100-mile that are beginner friendly. If you're thinking about running a 100-mile ultramarathon, that means that you're a very experienced runner, but the gap failure between running 100K and 100-mile is huge. At 100K, like the finishing rate is probably around 80% for most events. When you flip to the 100-mile, most races are 40 to 60% DNF rate. No matter which race you pick, what makes the 100-mile so difficult is that bad things will happen. Unpredictable thing will happen, and some events are a little bit less forgiving. On the flip side, you have events that are a little bit more generous with cutoff, that the mistakes are not as compounding, and therefore, even though you don't run the perfect race, you'll be able to adapt and you'll be able to keep going. And let's just say it, there's no easy 100-mile. That being said, even though there's no easy 100-mile, there are 100-mile that are very difficult. And just to illustrate a little bit, my fastest 100-mile is 16 hours, 18 minutes. My slowest is about 50 hours. Before diving into the list itself, I think it's helpful to talk about it a little bit because not everyone lives in the US, not everyone can race the same race that I'm highlighting. Your first 100-mile doesn't mean you're less fit or that you need to pick something easy. I think the difference is much more not necessarily on the fitness side, but on the experience side. And what does that mean is that there are some races, the logistic is just very difficult. You need to think much more about what do you do with your drop bag? Can you have a crew? Can you have pacers? And forgetting certain things, certain items at certain times will ruin your race. And when it's your first race, you want to resolve as few problems as possible, and you want to be able to focus much more on what you're doing rather than reacting to problems. You'll still have to problem solve, but some events are a little bit more forgiving with that. And in terms of being a little bit more forgiving, thinking about the cutoff is really important. A lot of 100-mile will have a cutoff of 30 hours or 36 hours, and it depends on the course. The cutoff is always right behind you, like the Grim Reaper is following you, and as soon as you trip, as soon as you have any snag, it's game over. The final thing that I would mention is that some races are a little bit more predictable than others. Taking an example that we'll talk about later, Javelina, it's gonna be hot. You know what you're getting yourself into. But there are races, especially if you're in the mountain, maybe it will be very hot, you'll get dehydrated because you're at high altitude, or there might be a snowstorm. And it might sound silly, these little things, but when you're in the middle of your first 100-mile, you'll get tired, you'll make bad decisions. Let's go in my top pick for what would be a great choice for your first 100-mile. And I'm not gonna go specifically with just like easy 100-mile because I think it's also important to pick something that is epic, something that will drive you, something that will excite you. You'll be training for months, you'll be running thousands of miles. Pick something that is exciting. The first one I wanna highlight is the Sedona 125. So why the Sedona 125, despite it being longer? You would think, well, that's even more advanced. Let's talk a little bit about the race. So the Sedona 125 is the second half of the Cocodona 250 mile. So first of all, if you want to run Cocodona someday, it might be smart to do Sedona so that you understand the later half of the course. But what makes this race particularly good for a first timer is that the pace and the cutoff are tailored for the 250 mile. You have a lot of time. In fact, you can most definitely hike the Sedona 125 the whole time. If you are very tired in the middle of the night, you can sleep and that will be fine. You will have the time. You don't always feel, like the Grim Reaper just breathing down your neck. This course is relatively runnable, especially the first half. It's pretty runnable, non-technical. It's gonna be hot, but you can make up some time while you're still, relatively fresh, and that's gonna be very helpful. Later, it's a little bit more difficult. The course itself is relatively flat and relatively non-technical. There's the Hangover Trail. I think that's the name that, yeah, in terms of navigation and runnability, not the most runnable, but as soon as you're out of that, a lot of it will be desert, single track, or even sometimes dirt road where you can really kind of switch off your brain and focus more on the adventure. And the adventure itself, it's so epic. It's a 125 mile point to point. In terms of things to consider though, is that the aid stations are pretty far apart. So you'll need to carry a little bit more gear, a little bit more fluid than usual, especially the first day. It's gonna be hot when you're going into Sedona. And then you go on the Cocochino Plateau, especially at night, it's pretty cold. So you have to have a fair amount of gear. But again, you have something like 72 hours, I think, to do 125 miles. Those 25 extra mile, yeah, it's gonna take you a while. We're thinking like 8-10 hours extra easily, but 72 hours more than compensate for that, making the Sedona 125 a great choice. Another race by Aravaipa, and yeah, a lot of the races on this list are from Aravaipa because they do a really good job at stocking aid station and having cutoff that are reasonable. And this other race is the Javelina 100 mile. It's 5 loop of 20 mile, which for me is a good kind of in between, something that is kind of epic, but at the same time, super practical. From a logistic point of view, you can have a drop bag at the start finish that you will see every 20 mile. And even if you want more, you could have another drop bag at the kind of middle aid stations, so at 10, 30, 50. You don't need to think, okay, when will it be nighttime for me to put my headlamp in the right spot? The other thing that makes this course relatively beginner friendly is that it's not technical. You don't really have to think about navigation, and there's a lot of people. I think it would be possible, to maybe do a wrong turn, but very unlikely. The things that make it a little bit spicier though is that it's really hot. So slow down in the middle of the day, make sure to have a lot of layers, make sure that you have a hat and a buff and something to put ice, but they will provide ice. So really they're doing a good job at making sure that people are able to keep going. The course is not technical, but it's the kind of non-technical that it's very easy to faceplant. It's relatively clear, but you will have these tiny rocks that your brain kind of shuts off a little bit, especially when you're tired, and that's where your toe will trip. You will faceplant and fall in the cactus, and it's gonna be terrible. The last piece to consider though is that this is a 30-hour cutoff, and 30-hour I think for this course is very reasonable, but any 30-hour race means that you kind of have to keep rolling. One thing that you can do is they also have the 100K. The 100K is the same course as the 100 miles, just that you do 3 loops instead of the 5. So you can come and do that maybe a year before, and that will be a great learning experience to understand how you deal with heat, prepare for the next year, and you even have 29 hours for that 100K. So this is a very generous cutoff, which really lets you experiment. But if heat is really not for you, another really good choice is the Rocky Racoon in Texas. I think it's basically the Texas version of Javelina, 5 times 20 miles, but you're in Texas in February or March. So in winter, it's not going to be as hot. It's also not a super technical course. It's more like leaves and rock. You need to be careful not to trip. Same thing. It's just so not technical that it's easy to trip on root or something. But it's not too bad. There's some elevation gain, but nothing crazy. Logistic is relatively simple. You have aid station every 5 miles. You will see the same aid station. The loop is 20 miles, so you can have your drop bag at the start finish. It's easy to organize pacers. Also, it's easier for your crew. So all of these factors make it very similar to Javelina, and you don't have to deal with extreme heat. The thing here that you need to be careful is that weather is a little bit more unpredictable. And potentially the race weekend will be rainy, will be very cold, and can get very muddy. And if these are the conditions, very muddy trail at Rocky Raccoon, it makes the race actually pretty challenging. Before we dive any deeper, big news or exciting news, you might or might not know, my big project this year in terms of movie is my friend Brian that attempted his 10th Leadville 100-mile finish. It's coming up in a week or two from now, so stay tuned to the channel. Obviously, subscribe so you can have the notification. This movie is not just a movie about running or ultra running. This is the story of a man, a father, a husband, a friend that tried to become the best version of himself. It's a movie that highlights the importance of community, surrounding yourself with positivity to be able to face your inner demon. It's a story about no one is perfect, but you can always work towards improving yourself. One of my most favorite race, the Zion 100 mile. It's in the most scenic race. It's one of my most favorite race. And it's also actually relatively beginner friendly, or it's a great choice for a first 100 mile. The main reason for that is that they give you 36 hours to finish this race. They could have made it 30 hours, but yeah, then it would not be on this list. But the extra 6 hours really gives you the buffer if you have any issue, GI issue, anything like that. You're able to recover, you can sleep a little bit. I've slept on that course and it's super epic, which you can watch my video on my channel. It's so gorgeous. And when it's so gorgeous like that, first, when you're training for it, you have an epic goal in mind, which is very helpful. On race day, it's easy to get distracted by everything that is happening and not focus too much on just how painful it is. It's not repetitive. It's 100 mile, a huge loop. You have views pretty much all the time, especially when you're on these mesa, you can see very far the whole course. So absolutely wonderful adventure. And even myself, I do it every time I can. I've done it, I think, 4 or 5 times. And the only reason I might not do it one year is because I have another race that is conflicting. You have buffer. The aid stations are very good. The spice here, though, is that it can be pretty hot down in the desert. And some aid stations are a little bit further apart. Also, just the nature of it being a huge loop makes the logistic a little trickier. You have to kind of know where you're going to be when nightfall comes, which means that you need to understand your pace to some extent. It's going to be a little harder for your crew, a little bit harder for your pacer. And the last piece is that some of these sections, it's mostly non-technical, but you do have some pretty steep downhill that are not super fun, especially Flying Monkey. It's not great. It's going to be short-lived and you'll be fine, but it's not, you're not going to be running downhill Flying Monkey. You're going to grab the rope. And the last thing is that when you're on these mesa, even in daytime, and even myself, I've done it several times, I always make a wrong turn somewhere. It's never dramatic. It's never, you go 6 miles in the wrong direction. It's just, where's the trail? Where's the trail? And especially at night, but even during daytime, you're going to lose it a few times. So it's good to understand how to navigate, having the course on your GPS watch. But if logistic is something that you're worried about, or you're really not sure how your body will react to these long distance events, then you can do the flip side of that, which personally is not my favorite, but it is obviously something that you can consider. And it's these short loop course. The ones I've done, for example, will be Jackpot Ultra in Vegas or across the year in Phoenix, where you have a 1 or 2 mile course and you just go and go and go and go and go and go. This is much more of a fitness thing than an adventure. It's not trail running, it's ultra running. So it really depends what you're trying to get into. Personally, I enjoy doing these races mostly to test my own limit, to understand what's my fitness level this year and dial a little bit fueling, because it simplifies a lot of variable. You know how the weather will be, the course, you will definitely not get lost, hopefully. It's not technical, it's pavement, but pavement can be a little bit hard on joint. And it will become a fitness test, but also what makes it challenging, it becomes very much a mental test because it's extremely repetitive, extremely, kind of boring, really. So you have to balance that. You don't have the fun adventure, but at the same time, you have the simplicity of having your aid station and your crew every 1 or 2 miles. You don't need to carry anything or almost anything. And I think across a year, at least, I don't know for a Jackpot, And there's so many other examples of races like that, right? But across the year, I think you could technically sign up for the 6-day event and do your 100 mile at whatever pace you want. So you technically don't really have a cutoff. Maybe your long-term goal would be to do a race like Western State or Hard Rock. There's a lot of Western State qualifier. In fact, some of the races that I've listed now are actually Western State qualifier. But if you want to do Hard Rock, it's good to get a qualifier as soon as possible. And Hard Rock qualifier tend to be more for seasoned runner. In fact, a lot of them, you can't just sign up. You need to have like qualifying standard. It's lottery based. So a lot of the list is actually not easy to get into. But one that I think is an interesting choice, even if it's going to be your first 100 mile, is the Mogollon Monster. 100 mile, point to point, very epic. And this course is, it's just all over the place. It's very interesting because you have these, like, you're climbing and then you're going down. You're not going to be running down a lot of those downhills. Way too technical, way too steep. But then you're on the plateau and then you're on the dirt road and then you can run and you can make up speed very quickly. So when it comes to a Hard Rock qualifier specifically, this is probably the one that is the simplest to get into and complete. I think the cutoff also specifically for this race is relatively generous. Aid stations are a little bit far apart, which makes it a little tricky, and it can be pretty hot during the day. I had myself the year I did it. Also, there was a storm. I don't know if that's typical, but other than that, you kind of know what you're signing up for. But just to contrast what are races that I think it's really not a good choice for a first time, I'm going to list a few of them. And what I would say before doing that, it's a preface where you pick your own adventure. And pretty much all of these races, I've met someone who picked that as their first race and they finished. So it's just, you got to prepare a little bit more, and there's challenges that you might want to gradually come to. One race that I want to do someday, but I haven't done it, it's the Plain 100 in Washington. I think technically there's only like one aid station, so it's mostly self-support. I'm not even sure if the course marking exists. So you need to be much more self-reliant, which obviously that means less support from aid station, from your crew, from pacers, making it not super, super friendly if it's your first time. Another one, the Ouray 100 mile, one of my favorite adventure, but definitely not one I would recommend as a first time because it is tough. It's extremely tough. And despite the fact that you have 52 hours, those 52 hours, you're going to use them. It's relatively tight in terms of cutoff based on how much elevation gain you have to deal with. The elevation and potentially weather increment is very common that you will have thunderstorm in the middle of the afternoon when you're climbing on a mountain pass. And the last one I would mention that a lot of people pick for their first race is the Leadville 100 mile. There's no qualification. It's a race that is very popular, so you have a lot of people that choose it as their first race, and that's fine, I guess, but this is a race that you need to be able to like handle a lot of different skill very well. You need to be able to run relatively fast in those first 40 miles. It's not a race that you're given a lot of leeway because there's cutoff at almost every aid station, and the way the cutoff are devised, you need to be running a lot of those 40 miles. There's no way you can actually do these 40 miles if you're just walking the whole time. Like it's the flip side of Sedona 125, right? And then you do Hope Pass. So you need to be a good power hiker going up and down relatively easily despite the altitude. That altitude will kick you in the nuts. Training and running for 100 mile is a big deal. I say inexperienced, but I don't mean inexperienced. You're an experienced runner, but it's the first time that you're testing this distance. And it's thousands of miles in training. It's hundreds, if not thousands of hours of training, preparation, doing everything right. You don't want to waste your effort because you pick a race that is just not suited for you. So the choice for your first 100 mile is super important. At the same time, picking a race just because it's an easy 100 mile, you're just going to run a handful of 100 mile in your life. Like there's a finite number of races that you can realistically do. I say make them count. Failure sometimes is part of progress. If you want to do Leadville as your first race, go ahead. If you want to try Ouray as your first race, go ahead. I'm really not saying you should not do these things. Maybe that will lead to an NF. That's fine. That's part of learning, that's part of growing. Just trying to put things in perspective where you can still find epic race that will really push your limit, be a good growth opportunity, and then going from there to what would be more a season or veteran type of race. I mean, hard rock is an obvious one, but you can't just get in hard rock like that. It's going to take 10 years. So that one kind of does it by itself. But selecting the right race that will create memories forever, an adventure that will really matter, is important. At the end of the day, it's about pushing your limit. It's about having adventure. So you go out there right now, you sign up for a race, you train, you prepare, and you have fun out there. As always, if you appreciate this video, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe, share with your friends, consider subscribing to my Patreon, and see you next time.